we have one last panel, and then we're gonna go get some snacks and drinks. So now our final topic is kind of a spicy one on DePIN business models. Again, to wrap up the day on who pays and who profits in the industry. And I'm gonna invite back Robert Koschig from 1KX. And he was talking earlier today, but if you don't remember, he's been doing a lot of fundamental research in the DePIN space for quite some time. So we're just gonna finish fixing the microphones, and we'll get started in a minute.
You can stay there. But where's Jakob? Jakob.
I know when Jakob is, I can get him.
Carry complete the license. Yeah. All right. Mr. Jakob, please come to stage.
Yeah, welcome to this last panel. I'm also here with Daniel Ammann, co-founder and president of Onocoy. And hopefully, yes, there he is, Jakob, who is the head of blockchain operations at Powerledger. Yeah, before we jump into the discussion on business models, maybe two concepts. First, maybe hands up, who in the room remembers the DePIN flywheel we talked about earlier? That doesn't seem too convincing. So the DePIN flywheel is just, you know, you do have a certain demand that you want to serve, like street map data. So you organize the supply. Typically, you start with rewards. You tell them like, yeah, this will be worth something. And then, you know, people start mapping the car with their iPhones or whatever. And that's how you can serve this demand. And then eventually the demand is also like, oh, this is cool data. I pay for it. With this money, you can expand basically your supply. And this creates this flywheel. So this was concept number one. And the next one is basically just in general, DePINs always sound so complex, right? There's 700 or whatever. I mean, DePIN scan, you can look it up. I don't know how many it is. But they all are very similar in the structural components that they have. So obviously you have a user who needs something, and we'll talk about that in a second. But then how to serve them? Well, you have the supply side, which is the guy who has the camera to map the car or the guy who has the storage. Then you typically also have some role that does the verification, the validation, as we heard in the last talk, which is important because do you know this street car data, street map data is really real or not just generated? Then you also need some sort of like accounting ledger to say like, oh, this was paid, the work was done, which is the blockchain. And last but not least, you typically also have some sort of like gateway function. It's not necessary, but often it helps to say, well, if you want to sell this car or a street map data, you don't want to, you know, get it from the iPhone of every single person that provides it, but you have some entity that bundles this and sells that, right? So these two concepts, the flywheel and these four central roles that you have to serve your demand, keep that in mind. And with that, yeah, let's kick it off. Yeah, maybe let's start simple by just explaining what does your DePIN basically, what problem does your DePIN solve, and yeah, how does it benefit from decentralization? And yeah, let's start with you, Jakob.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And so as said, I work at Powerledger. Powerledger is an energy DePIN. We have basically two main use cases. One is the peer-to-peer trading of excess renewable energy. So assume you have solar panels on your rooftop. You generate solar energy during high production hours. You produce an oversupply of that energy and you want to sell that. Currently, you're basically limited to selling it to the utility company directly, which oftentimes yields you a very low price, sometimes even a negative rate. What we enable is basically, we enable you to trade it to someone that wants that energy. That could be either another individual or even a company that wants the proof of renewable energy. And we'll facilitate and automate this trading for you using smart contracts and AI agents nowadays as well that do it on your behalf. The other thing that we do is we basically take that even a step further. From production, we then also do certification, and we have a marketplace for renewable energy certificates and carbon credits. So you not only produce your energy, we also prove that you produce your energy, and you can generate revenue based on those certificates. Why is decentralization needed? I think we are in an interesting case. Energy is getting more and more decentralized, whether we bring in crypto or not. We have more and more prosumers. Prosumers are people that consume and produce at the same time. Those are people that have solar panels. The energy space gets more decentralized because you have more people actually bringing energy into the market. And that's why decentralization is necessary or happening. And we just provide a layer where traditional stakeholders like utilities companies, retail consumers, industrial companies can basically communicate on the same level, because currently that's not possible, and we just facilitate that.
All right, Daniel from Onocoy. We are making GPS accurate down to centimeters. So we're in an industry that predates AI, that predates blockchain technology from the 1970s, which essentially is still the same, but it can be made more accurate, and that's what we're working on. So we're not making a better GPS, but we're making it more accurate. Now this works by having a decentralized network of reference stations, of collecting that data, consolidating it, and then selling it on. So already the fundamentals of a DePIN, you have a supply of data, you do something with the data, and then you sell it to the demand side. That's what we implement in a technology that has been around for 20, 30 years. The DePIN approach is we can roll out a network that is much denser, much more cost effective, much more automated than if you would be doing the same thing in a traditional way. If you had plenty of money, if you would invest upfront hundreds of millions to roll out a highly dense network on a planet, you could do that, and you'd be waiting for this flywheel for 10 years because you invest first, then you need to find customers. But in a DePIN way, this goes hand in hand. Once it moves, it starts to accelerate. And that's what we're working in. I think the important thing here is we're docking, and that's unlike many other DePINs, we're docking into an existing industry. So we're not doing something new, and it's not the technology that drives us, but it's the business model that we enable thanks to a blockchain, thanks to an automated approach.
All right. Yeah, I mean, let's continue on that because, yeah, as the title says, let's start with who pays. And so we start on the demand side. Yeah, who are your customers, basically? And also what might be interesting, because you both have been around for a little bit longer now. Did this change in the past? And also, do you expect anything to change in the future? Yeah, maybe Daniel, you start.
Who's the customer? We have three main segments. One is individual end users, the long tail people who have a tractor or a drone, and they need a data stream to make that thing more accurate. Long tail, very small business. Today, not well served by the existing industry because typically these sell annual subscriptions, so they have very high costs just for their one use case. The biggest market segment these days is a direct B2B business into people who already have a network, people who operate such a high precision network, say in the United States, and they want to expand into Europe. For those people, they need a source of data, and it's a consideration whether they want to build out their own network or they want to source it from somebody else. And if there's somebody who has a dense network that is not competing with them on the market front, then they source from there. That is the horizontal approach where we can sell into an existing industry. The third segment, but that's probably the slowest, is a bundling with hardware. So an OEM, somebody who builds a robotic lawnmower, who builds a drone, who builds a car, an autonomous vehicle, who puts together the service and the hardware, that the product that they sell into a one box, into a one product that they sell, and they need some white label service or something in the back end that enables that. That's long tail, that's very long cycles as it goes alongside the product life cycles. I think the challenges that we see is, especially in the center of the three segments, in the B2B existing industry, is how can we raise acceptance of a blockchain project, of a network that is not directly controlled by the supplier? We don't control the individual stations, nor do you. So you cannot give a guarantee, but those people have been living in a world where they get SLAs, uptime guarantees, they get all sorts of paper agreements and penalties if things go wrong, and we cannot solve that in a project like this. So we need to find ways how we can replicate that in a smart contract environment. And I think that's one of the main business model challenges that we see. How can we dock into an existing industry with those new paradigms, those new ideas?
I think for us, it basically started with this thesis that we've had from the beginning, which said that there's always these main players. Think of them as like the Googles of the world in the energy space. It's the utilities companies that have always been there. They will always be there. We call them like mountains, and you can decide to either go around the mountains or you can build on top of those mountains. And our theory when we launched in 2016 was we believe that we have to work together with these utilities in order to survive in this market. Having said that, we were right on that bet. That means our customers are still the same. We sell to utilities, we sell to suppliers of energy. We are in a B2B2C, so the end user is using our white label platform, but we're selling to the utility that is actually paying us for that service. And having seen other players that opened up at that time, one is, for example, Energy Web. A lot of people that have been around since the early days of the energy DePINs in 2017, I've seen them. They quickly launched a few months after us. They've went a different route. They thought, we need to go the hardware route. We start selling smart meters. We start going directly into people's homes. And they're basically consultants now. And I don't mean that in a discrediting way. They've just changed their business model entirely. We didn't have to, because at the time we made maybe a lucky, maybe the right, I would call it the right one. Some people call it lucky. The lucky guess that we have to build with the utilities. And that has allowed us to grow also as the utilities are more willing to adopt these new technologies and also kind of grow with them. Initially, when I talked to a utility for the first 2 meetings, the word blockchain would not come up. Not in a single time. Because if I wanted to sell my product, if I said I'm working in blockchain, they'd be like, no, these new technologies, I don't understand them. They're not really delivering anything. If I went in and basically said, well, look, this is what we deliver. This is what your customers want. We deliver to you a customer retention strategy that no one else has, because we deliver a value to your customers that none of your competitors can do. And customers will stay with you for that. And they might even churn your competitors and come to you. They're like, wow, amazing. How do you prove that? And we're like, oh, we have this amazing technology and we can show that everything is trusted and everything is transparent. And they're like, wow, sign me up. What is it? I'm like, blockchain. Oh, fuck. And it's like, that's when they're like, okay, we got ourselves into that loophole. We already said it's amazing. We can't back out now. And this has slightly changed now. I think people are more open towards blockchain. I had just had a conversation with a lovely colleague from Oxpo before. In 2018, Oxpo explored blockchain as well. Then kind of went away, said we don't want anything to do with this technology. Now they're having several kind of projects where they want companies and startups to apply to build in that space. So we see kind of this technology being more and more accepted, but you have to go with the market. And I think that there we're very similar in our approaches. We understand what the market is and we don't try to make it anything that it isn't. None of us are operating in a market that is new. Other DePINs operate in markets that are new and they have their own challenges. For us, it was always about, are we cheaper, are we better, or are we more innovative, or give a new way of actually solving part of that problem? And if you have an edge in that, whether you're in crypto or not, you will have a way to survive. And I think that's what both of our projects have been able to do.
All right, so both of you in existing markets, both of you B2B, both of you are not allowed to talk about blockchain in the first sales pitch. Daniel, maybe I saw that you guys talking about selling the product, you use distributors. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit, because typically, I mean, creating demand, like selling the product, is typically something that DePINs in the past were not really good at. Right, if you look at Filecoin, for example, you as a supply side provider, you need to organize your demand yourself, right? You were supply and sales team in one person, basically, right? So that's why there was not too much sticky demand, and a lot of these other providers, for example, GeoNet, also RTK provider, they use a centralized approach where they say the foundation is the sales team. LivePeer does the same, right? There's a lot of DePINs where the foundation kind of like is this gateway function. That's why I find it interesting that this is different in your case. Yeah, maybe can you elaborate and also explain some reasoning behind it?
Sure. I think there's two ways how you can go into an existing market. Either you go vertical, meaning you try to cover as much of the value chain as you can, but then you need to focus on certain verticals. That means in a DePIN context, you build the hardware that you sell, you make revenue with that, you do the crypto economics, the whole setup around it. You then go to the demand side, you provide the hardware there and the service there. So you do everything in a closed ecosystem. All works together nicely, and that's the vertical thing. But you cannot cover a market, especially not a market that exists and that has been fragmented in different verticals for 20 years. The other approach is going horizontal, so you do one thing in the value chain that others cannot solve, and DePIN has the very nice property of being able to cost effectively roll out a huge infrastructure, and that's something that is of a high value to an existing industry. So our approach is, and it goes a bit back to what we discussed before, docking into an existing industry. Through that, we have a clear focus. We actually make the existing industry our friends. They want to source from us. We are not competing with them. You can go vertical and then everybody from the existing industry hates you, and you have the challenge of having to replicate the channels to market, and you're competing mostly on price. And GeoNet that you mentioned, that's exactly what they do. They are doing good business with that, but there's a limit because they have 20 established players around that fight against them, not with Web3 methods, but with traditional ways, and they've always been there. And we don't want the hassle of doing all that. That's why we go through distribution. Also on the hardware side, we rather use existing hardware that is there already. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It has been around for 20 years. Yes, we can make it proprietary and locked into our ecosystem, but we'd rather have people even build their own piece of hardware. They can take a Raspberry Pi and put a GPS receiver on it, and they're good for with $200 they can participate. Demand side, same thing. We rather sell into big correction service providers, and our first revenues that we now have since the second quarter confirms that. Large scale reference correction service providers come to us and want to source data from us in bulk, because they understand we are not competing, we're actually solving a problem for them. And I think that's, in the long run, the winning proposition.
Okay, maybe also maybe if you, Jakob, have any learning, or have you seen any good novel approach to bridge the gap between demand and supply on your end? I mean, making friends with this industry sounds like a nice advice, but
I think in our industry, maybe, or for my example, not, but there was one example that I recently saw. So maybe zooming out a bit more, like one of the general issues that DePIN often sees is that people believe they have product market fit because they have supply side revenue. So they can start selling hardware and they have revenue, and they quite lucrative revenue, and they're like, well, this is working. And well, at one point, whoever mines your whatever token that you're offering or provides any service, he wants to see, or that person wants to see a value. Now, where does that value come from? Usually from revenue generated on the demand side that somehow feeds into a buyback and burn loop, or some other form of tokenomics incentive system that incentivizes the supply side. Well, we have our very good friends at Accurist. They're providing a decentralized compute service, and they're utilizing old phones where you can run the supply of this decentralized compute. And they ran into a similar issue. A lot of people have phones at home, they're willing to onboard and they're willing to provide compute. And then they're like, okay, so how do we get the demand side? So either we start partnerships with large companies that are willing to sign some form of SLA or some form of contract that they're willing to build on us for the foreseeable future. I don't know, 1 year, 2 year, whatever. But on top of that, we want retail users to start using us for smaller use cases, like for example, host a website on us. How do we show them that this is possible? Well, so what they did is they built a vibe coding platform that just allows people to build and host the platform automatically on Accurist. So you don't even have to build your platform anymore, your website. You don't have to worry about where to host it. You don't have to worry about anything. Accurist does it for you. So what Accurist did is they built the product that they see as the actual user on the demand side, and then bring this product to the users. So they don't have to wait for the users to see the opportunity in what they deliver, but they've already created the product and just basically gave the product for free to the users, so they start understanding the value. And once they see one value proposition like that, they start building other things. And this is a very novel approach. I've never seen it, and I'm not here to make any like advertisement for Accurist. This was very interesting. Again, for our system, it's for our use case in energy, it's very different. I remember I went to an energy conference 3 years ago in Bilbao, one of the largest energy conferences in Europe, and I was there as one of the only ones coming from tech. I was quite overwhelmed because I'm not originally from the energy space. And I talked about DePIN, and they're like, what the hell is DePIN? And then I learned about a term called DER, which stands for Decentralized Energy Resources, which has been around in energy for almost a decade now. And they just didn't know what DePIN meant, but basically it's the same thing. Decentralized energy resources, any form of battery, solar panels, anything that is decentralized, that is owned by individuals or owned by different parties, that is not part of a centralized grid. And so for us, it was really about, okay, understand what is in the market and then utilize what is already available and just basically bridge it over to the technology side. So sometimes you have to invent the product, as Accurist did, to actually sell your idea or to show that it works. And some other times you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just take what's there and build on top of that and just understand what type of language you have to speak in order for everyone to understand it and buy in.
All right. Yeah, with this, I mean, supply side is actually good because we also want to talk a little bit about who's earning and not just who's paying. Yeah, maybe again, switch to you, Daniel, on your supply. I mean, I saw earlier presentation, like you have 4,500 miners. If June is correct, I think there's the same number there. I would guess this is not 4,500 individuals. Not sure if you know, probably don't know all of them, but maybe there are some larger teams or even enterprises. Yeah, maybe you can share some light on your supply side, like what it, you know, if you know the consistency, but also if you know, can explain what it entails, kind of like what's the effort and also what's in it for them.
Yes, we currently have close to 5,000 stations, around 7,000 validated, but not everything is online all the time. But this we can solve with redundancy. And the demographics behind that is quite interesting. Because we are horizontal, that means we can welcome existing installations. If you have a station or if you have a network, if you're a country who operates a network already or a private RTK correction service provider, you can provide the data into our system, which means you don't even need to install new hardware. We actually give those people an additional monetization path without having to do anything. Some of them see it as a competition, but in most cases they don't, because they provide local support in local languages, design-in support, and all sorts of additional added values that we as a global project cannot provide. So one part is existing networks, typically Web 2 style people. They don't necessarily want to have crypto. We give them crypto if they really want. Others, they just provide the data for free because they like the idea of having such a consolidation network. On the more Web 3 side, there's two types. There's the individual people who buy such a station because they've been doing 20 other DePIN projects and they like this one as well, so they get our token on the basis of per day, per quality, per number of neighbors that they have. They get a reward. The box, if they buy something off the shelf costs somewhere around 500 euros. If they build it themselves, it's 200. If they buy a super professional one, it's a 1,500 euros. So there's a whole range that they can use, and after about a year, they have a break even if they do everything right and the thing is up. But what was interesting was there's a class of companies evolving which do that in a professional way. Companies which finance or even roll out networks in a large scale. They, in some cases, they themselves work with the community or do it themselves, and they cover complete countries. We did some experiments. For example, in Malaysia, we had nothing half a year ago. We put additional rewards out in Malaysia. Now we have 60 stations there up and running because we see demand. We have a Chinese customer, they want to expand into Southeast Asia. And we have shown that through such semi-professional to super professional companies that coordinate the crowd, so it's not even us that need to do this, but it's those multipliers, we can cover countries in a month or in 2 months when we see demand. And I think that's quite interesting, these dynamics and these new players that help also on the supply side.
Yeah, maybe as a follow-up, because you said like they can bring in their own device. Maybe not to get too technical, I'm not sure if this is possible, but you can talk a little bit about the kind of like verification and validation and kind of like, yeah, SLAs basically. Like how do you ensure the quality of your service? And because, you know, if I just spin up an antenna, probably it's not good.
Yes, there is 2 aspects to it. One is the quality assurance that the demand side wants. They want to be sure that the data that we provide can be used to then have a device in the field that can locate itself accurately to centimeters. We're doing quite a lot. We look at all sorts of measurements. We do statistics. We do real-time speed detection on each and every station. Every second we can detect earthquakes through that. And that's for quality assurance. On the more supply side, we have to take care of potential fraud. Since we're an open platform, anyone could inject data that may or may not be physical of origin. So we are employing different methods, including also AI. We just recently announced a project which is funded by European Space Agency. We're together with ETH Zurich and Professor Soyavo, who was here earlier in the morning. We're working together on applying AI to classify such potentially fraudulent data that is also happening in the real world, like, for example, in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. We see a lot of spoofed data that needs to be detected.
Okay. And yeah, before we jump to Powerledger, one last question here, so we can round up the, you know, payment to profit part. You hand out the tokens to, you know, the miners basically. How does the token accrue value then eventually, right? For those who haven't been here in the morning when you talked about it.
Yes, it's the classical buyback and burn mechanism. So it's a deflationary buyback and burn with the tokens that people get and put on an exchange. We buy them back as a function of the fiat revenue that we make from the Web2 industry, and then we burn a portion and we put another portion back into circulation for the rewards. So the tokens, the remaining tokens from the pre-minted tokens, they appreciate in value because there's going to be fewer, and all the fiat revenues is going to be pushed into the token value.
All right. Well then, yeah, let's jump back to Powerledger. Yeah, in interest of time, we don't have too much time, but maybe share also a little bit light of like, okay, how is the supply side working? Maybe what's interesting in the contrast to Onocoy is also basically you guys run your own blockchain, right? As a cost factor for the network, if I remember correctly. Maybe shed some light on this as well. And yeah, how the token basically then accrues value at the end, because I guess the token holder at the end is also the one who profits. I guess so.
So I think for us the interesting thing is the supply side is not that interesting because I easily said everyone that runs any form of DER, so solar panels or batteries, could be on our supply side. The problem is, or with the caveat that unless we have onboarded your utility that you're working with, you cannot be a customer of ours, because we don't build with, or we don't work with individuals. It's just too cumbersome for us to onboard every single customer. Having said that, obviously we have different areas where we have the marketplace for the carbon credits and for the renewable energy certificates. So there we have hundreds of different sellers and buyers. Sellers obviously on the supply side that either come through us on the peer-to-peer side already, or they come individually, they already generate their own certificates. As far as the token is concerned, we do not have a classic buyback and burn token. I mean, we were founded in 2016, which I know for a lot of people doesn't sound that old. In our space, that's almost a dinosaur ancient age. So at the time, our token utility has changed from different use cases. Originally as an escrow token. Now it's mainly used as a payment and access token for platforms. And I think the really interesting part that you mentioned is we actually no longer run our own layer. Again, we launched in 2016 at the time as a fork of Bitcoin. Imagine running a DePIN on a fork of Bitcoin, not really sustainable. Then moved to Ethereum on a non-permissioned or permissioned network on Ethereum, because we believed the utilities didn't want all this data public. We were wrong. The utilities actually wanted all of it public, so they forced us to move to a permissionless Ethereum setup, and then obviously Ethereum got too expensive. I mean, I'll give you an example. We have one big utility we work with in Austria. Alone from them, we have over 3 million transactions per month. We just can't afford it on Ethereum. Let's be real, the transaction cost gets too expensive. And at the time when we made that change in like beginning of 2019, the whole, what other layer one was out there that was really promising and able to scale? Not sure anyone would have said one that maybe is up there now. The layer two infrastructure was also, me personally, I'm not a big fan of layer twos, neither are our founders, because obviously there's some extraction that is happening from the layer ones, and I don't want to get into the details of layer twos, but at the time it made sense for us to build a proprietary chain. We loved the idea of Solana at the time, and we built a fork of Solana and ran Powerledger blockchain, which was a fork of Solana. Solana at the time, maybe, or shortly after, going down to like $7-8 a token. Everybody thought Solana was over. Well, everyone realized Solana is not over, so we pivoted, because we also realized we build products. We don't run infrastructure, we don't run a protocol. We spent half of my day was basically just on running and dealing with validators, which is not what I like to do, and it's also not where our expertise is. I would say 90% of our employees are electrical engineers. They have other areas of expertise. And so we pivoted, and we're now fully running on Solana main chain. But we launched our token in 17 on Ethereum, and we're a multi or dual token chain now. We have our token on Ethereum, we have our token on Solana, we have some of the core infrastructure running on Ethereum, some of the core infrastructure running on Solana. But maybe as a takeaway for people that don't want to make the same mistakes, because we spent a lot of resources and a lot of time on that. If you're a new project, I would recommend start building on a layer one of your choosing, whichever one that is. Ethereum is good right now. Obviously, there's other alternatives. I'm a big believer in Solana, but I'm not going to shill anything. Build on a layer one, get your customers, get everything settled. If you really need a proprietary protocol, build it in a second stage. Don't start out building a protocol, because you're wasting way too much time building a protocol, and you're spending way too much time figuring out how to deal with validators, how to deal with other aspects that are not relevant to the core customer of your service. Because when you're in DePIN, a lot of the services or a lot of the customers, they don't care too much about the tokenomics of things. They care about what value you provide to them. And the same goes for tokenomics. If you're a DePIN project and you come from a different area, let's say, whatever, geolocation or even in energy, focus on what you know, focus on the product, and the token is a side thing. Don't overthink the token. It is necessary potentially to bootstrap your company, but don't delve too much into it, because I've seen a lot of DePINs that are no longer around, or no longer around in the way they were, because they realized, oh, the token is such a big thing, and people keep asking us, when does the token finally accrue value? And now we're focusing 80% of our brain activity on the token, and you forget about where you actually generate revenue. So go back to where you're good at, and if you have made a mistake in the past, so be it. We changed chains 5 times. We're here now, we're very happy where we are, we're still around, which I would say is already a success of its own, but go out there and focus on what you're good at.
Yeah, thanks very much. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I guess people can just grab you now in the after hours. I'm not sure if there's any more announcements from the organizer or, oh yeah, well then, thanks again.
Thanks, Robert, for hosting this panel. It was the last second request to Robert, and I think he did a really, really great job. Thank you so much. The day, so kind of the formal part comes to an end. I enjoyed it a lot. I saw that many people also enjoyed it. I hope you all took some meaningful connections out of it, some new inputs. Now comes the fun part. So we will have an apéro. We will serve it in quite quickly with drinks and food, and we can stay here and connect with each other more. And then we can even connect more tomorrow. So like for me, it's actually the more exciting part. So like we will, after having got all these inputs from all these different experts, builders, policymakers, we can now kind of try to reason about it and maybe push some narratives forward or find some solutions for problems we are having. So this is going to happen here in a very bottom-up manner, and it's quite inclusive. If you want to be there, come around. It would be really much appreciated. And then in a second, here will be a slide, but we have like a sponsor for the apéro, which is a devs group, which today, unfortunately, no one is here, but tomorrow there will be one person of them around. And I mean, some companies here have good experience with them, so they're like a kind of a IT company helping in developing DePIN projects, and the apéro is from them. And with that, I want to thank you all that you made it up to here. I think it was tiresome. I mean, we had 10 minutes talks the whole day on 2 stages, and I'm very happy that this is over now and we can enjoy.